All right, guys, welcome to another episode of the Lowdown. I am your host, Misha Aravena. Before we begin on today's topic, let me introduce my awesome panel. I have Mr. Alex Pope.
Gentlemen, let the games begin.
Yes, the games are about to begin. And lastly, Mr. Andrew Stupart.
Get down!
We just all love Arnold here, I guess. We always got to do a Schwarzenegger impression. But anyway.
Get to the chopper!
Oh,
Get to the chopper!
That's going to be a whole other show, is the Predator show.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway, Andrew, this is your topic. Very, very interesting, fascinating topic. So I'm going to throw it over to you to introduce it and get us started on this one.
Dun 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 dun. Dun 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 dun. For anyone who's a sci-fi fan, you immediately recognize that as the haunting music from the Terminator as you're building up to watch T2 Judgment Day, one of the most amazing blockbuster action films of all time. And you're saying to yourself, why is Andrew starting off the episode making reference to T2 Judgment Day? We're not talking about that tonight, but what we are talking about is the rise of the machines. And that's why I did the Arnold impression at the beginning. It wasn't out of nowhere. I do want to sort of tie this episode into Terminator 2 Judgment Day. And you're thinking, why? Okay, tonight we're talking about automation. And so I'll make a connection for you guys. This isn't coming out of nowhere. So tonight's episode is all going to be about automation, the rise of the machines. And no, I'm not talking about Skynet. I'm not talking about robots, flying through space and shooting lasers down, or a giant, nuclear apocalypse started by the machines. I'm not talking about all of that. What I am talking about is the rise of the machines in a much more passive, but still very important and significant sense of this whole, what we would call the fourth industrial revolution. That is the cooperation of humans and robots, or cobotics, as you will, in this overarching subject that we call automation. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to start with actually one of my favorite scenes from Terminator 2 Judgment Day. In the sequel, we get a little bit closer to Miles Dyson, who's this genius who took found the arm of the Terminator in the factory from the previous movie and used that chip in order to come up with his revolutionary technology that would eventually lead to Skynet, which was a project of Datadyne, the company that he's running. Yeah. And I remember he's talking to his wife in the living room, and as he's plugging away at his computer, and he goes, imagine a pilot that never calls in sick, that never is hungover or drunk on the job, a computer that can fly a plane. Okay. And you guys are thinking, well, this is way out of left field. What's he talking about? I have to remind viewers that we already have self-driving cars. We already have an eliminated position in the Toronto subway that's being replaced by a robot. We have machine learning, where a computer can be shown a picture of an apple 100 times and then understand what an apple is, or an orange, or a banana. So we have machine learning. We have advancements in the medical sector with robots assisting with surgery. And so, Miles Dyson wasn't too far off, even though it was a science fiction film from 30 years ago. He wasn't too far off, and automation, the rise of the machines, is closer than we think, and it's already happening. Mm-hmm. So I think one memory that I wanted to share before I dive in and bring it over to the panel here, I remember going to Nuit Blanche a couple years ago. And for anyone who doesn't know, Nuit Blanche is an annual festival. It's a nighttime festival in Toronto with experimental art and experimental sort of displays and what's the word I'm looking for? Exhibits, stuff like that. And I remember going to City Hall a couple of years ago, and my mind was blown because I'm standing at the gates of City Hall and I see these two cars that kept going in loops, loop after loop after loop, and they would break. They would be this close and then they would break, this close and then they would break over and over again. And if it wasn't for the power of automation, that wouldn't have happened. Okay.
Wow.
And so, guys, I have a lot to get through tonight, but I did want to jump right in because automation is a fantastically interesting subject. And so I'm going to jump in with transportation. I mentioned the subway. I mentioned the fact that, even though it's a unionized position and these union workers are really fighting for their jobs and, to stay employed by the Toronto Transit Commission, the Toronto subway on line 1 on the Young line has been, one of the positions is being replaced by an automated system that can use scanners to indicate, at what time to brake in order to stop in the station. We're having limos, Uber drivers, taxi drivers who are going to become redundant and obsolete in the next 10 to 15, maybe 20 years, as well as truckers, which is a multi-billion-dollar industry. I shouldn't say industry, but it's an employer of millions of people, and it's a major
around the whole world.
Career.
Millions of
it's
people.
around the world, and I'm talking specifically about the States and Canada. But you're right, Misha. Around the world, trucking is a major source of income, and it's a career for people. So now that I've finished my giant spiel and introduction, I'm going to throw it over to Alex to give me your thoughts about the advantages and disadvantages and any sort of worries that we may have as a society around automation of transportation.
Thank you for that wonderful intro there, Andrew. I'm really not sure whether or not I should be on one side of the fence or the other when it comes to this. On the one hand, I feel like there are some legitimate concerns. A lot of positions are going to be eliminated, as you said. Truck driving specifically, I don't know exactly what the statistic is, but I know that it's possibly the largest single employment sector among men. I could be wrong about that, but I believe it's like just a huge percentage of men drive for a living. I don't know if it's
one of the major it employs a lot of people in major cities around the world. Not so much in the countryside and the suburbs, but in cities, it's one of the biggest industries.
Or driving in general. So you've got tractor trailers and things like that, and then also Uber. I think if you combine that, it's like more than half of all men drive for a living. So on the one hand, I'm very concerned about that. On the other hand, I can't help but wonder if maybe this is a little bit alarmist. I know that humans are very adaptable, and I'm a big believer in the free market. And historically, technological innovation has, on average, only improved society. I can't think of, aside from war machines and things like that, I can't think of any examples where technology has made society worse on average overall. So yeah, I think I'm kind of on the fence. I'm not sure which way to go, but maybe you guys will persuade me.
Well, yeah, and that's, Alex, that's a good point you make, because it's progress on one side in terms of technology, the amount of technology that goes into automating a vehicle. You have sensors, you have a very sophisticated onboard computer, all these safety protocols that are in place on the one hand. So it is technology, but it's also job loss. So Misha, I want to throw it over to you. How do you feel about looking at, things like the subway, truck drivers, Uber drivers, taxi drivers as a whole? As Alex mentioned, it's an entire sector in its own of drivers. How do you feel about the changes that are afoot?
Well, what Alex was saying, I'm going to disagree a little bit, because for me, it's all about finding balance, right? And what I mean by that is a little sidetrack, but there was a great TV show called Tales from the Crypt, and they did a back-to-back episode. And one of the episodes was a guy who was obsessed with technology. He thought technology was the greatest thing, and it was about how that led to the downfall of his existence and basically humankind. And then the next episode was a guy, an older gentleman, who absolutely hated technology. And because he hated technology and wanted nothing to do with it, it made him very limited, right? And his life ended up going into the shambles as well. So for me, it's about finding the balance, because I think in terms of machines, what's missing is there's that human component of emotion, human emotion, that no matter what happens, a machine cannot comprehend. At least I don't think so. Terminator 2, great example. You're talking about Stu Part when he asks, "Why do you cry?" And he can't understand why human beings cry. He thinks it's pain, but it's not necessarily a physical pain. In the first Terminator, when he talks about Kyle Reese, it can't be reasoned with, it can't be bargained with, it will not stop, right?
Yeah.
So in terms of bringing it back to the cars and everything, that is one industry that unfortunately I think will be taken away by machines. Maybe not necessarily in our lifetime. I do have a friend that actually works for Air Canada, and he worries about that all the time, because he was talking about the planes are getting so sophisticated that he just kind of has to push a lot of buttons, and he still drives the plane, of course, or flies the plane, but not quite as much as they did back in the day. But I feel the more we progress with technology, we do all these amazing things, especially with medicine, but I feel our minds in a way do shrink a little bit. Young people don't know how to socialize, right? They're afraid of socializing. They hide behind their phones, and that's a result of technology a little bit. That's my first initial thoughts anyway.
I have a quick question for you though. I mean, like we eliminated elevator drivers a long time ago. I don't see a whole lot of out of work elevator controllers picketing in the streets, upset that they lost their jobs. I feel like
they're all dead, right, Alpo?
We're going to see people retire. Those jobs may or may not be replaced.
Yeah.
And I don't know that we're necessarily going to feel it as badly as people are saying.
Yeah. No, and I do agree, because I think as humans we have to live by the notion of adapt or die. I mean, when industries change, and I'll just briefly examine the TV industry, because that's where I came from. I've seen a very, very sharp decline in traditional ad revenues for, say, radio and TV. And so what I had to adapt or die. Either you get laid off, or you adapt and you get a new job. So I got into digital media and marketing. And I know that we've all gone through career changes or trainings or whatever, where we've had to, I mean, you, Alex, as well. You didn't really like what you were doing previously, and so you adapted. You went back to school.
The poster boy for reskilling.
This is it. That's it. You are the poster boy for reskilling. And so I think you and I have proven that you have to adapt or die, right? You can't just, if an industry is changing, you have to be able to look within yourself and reevaluate and say, what additional skills? I'm not talking about going and getting an MBA, a full other degree, but maybe a college diploma or something to get you on your feet in a new industry. Gentlemen, I'm really fascinated by this transportation topic. So I do want to just talk about a couple more things on the topic of transportation, because it's interesting stuff. Now, going back to our T2, which I really like that you tied that back in, Misha. One of the things I quoted at the beginning was, again, Miles Dyson, who was the mastermind behind Skynet and Datadyne, talking about that pilot who's not drunk or hungover or sick, right? And so something that you'd have to keep in mind, the more it is kind of a fine line, because yes, machines can make mistakes, but it's not the machines that make the mistakes, it's the people who program the machines, right? So would you rather put yourself in a position where you could have a drunk driver in the front seat? Maybe your Uber driver, your taxi driver is tired. Maybe they're on their 50th trip of the day and they're tired and they make a mistake. Maybe your Uber driver had a drink and they're a little bit more intoxicated than they thought. Maybe your friend is driving you home from a house party, they're intoxicated. So would you rather put your life in the hands of a machine, or would you rather put your hands in the life of a human who may be drowsy? You know what I mean? So how do you guys feel about the risks that we're taking you know, putting our lives in the machine, in the hands of a machine versus a human?
I don't know if
I'll
this
take the
is,
machine 100% of the time. Give me that machine.
Steve, for me, I don't know if this is an answer. Could you take a little bit of both, or do I have to pick one?
You have to pick one.
Okay, I
You
have to pick one.
one, Misha.
I would pick the human being. I don't
Okay.
like the idea of relying solely on a machine to do something. Now, it all depends on what it is you're doing, but I personally like the feeling knowing that I'm in control of something. And a machine can make mistakes. Like I do believe that. I know, Andrew, you were saying it's the person who programs it, but I don't necessarily think that. And again, going back to Terminator, that's one of the major themes of, you know, they put all of their resources in computers running everything, and look what happened. They got so smart that they took over everything. A great example, have you guys seen 2001: A Space Odyssey, HAL?
Yeah.
Right? He starts thinking for himself and turns against the crew. And there's so many movies about technology taking over, and maybe I'm just influenced by Hollywood so much, I don't know. But I fear that about, you know, technology taking over. I do think I am a traditional guy. I like old school things, and for me, if we could find a balance, so there's, you know, good technology, but also human beings still in charge of some things, that would be an ideal world for me.
Yes, Misha, I'm gonna respond to that because I agree, and it's kind of like, um, I guess what I'll say to respond to that is I do agree, and you have to ease into things, right? So, you know, they would have to do 1,000 test runs of the young line before they can, you know, get rid of the person who's backing up the computer and just let the computer drive. And even then, they're going to still have that guard position on Toronto Transit. So someone still has to, you still need a human inside the subway car. It's just the roles are changing, right? And so you could lose, I mean, there may be some casualties in terms of union jobs because that computer may take over the Toronto subway. But again, this has to be, and that was actually going to be another topic I was going to talk about. The government has to really regulate these things, especially because it's a human safety issue. Okay.
Yeah.
When it comes to drugs, food, transportation, there's a reason that there's heavy government intervention, especially in Canada, because these things need to be regulated. Okay. And what I'll say is I remember reading the news when there was an automated car crash. I think it was like an Uber got in a car crash, like one of those automated cars got in a crash with an Uber or something like that, which proves the point that we're not ready. You have to think about, especially in Canada or in the northern part of the States, inclement.
Hold on there. I got to stop you there, Stupart. Just because there's an accident and somebody dies does not mean that we're not ready. Because let's not forget that every day 3,700 people die in motor vehicle accidents globally, right?
I like how you
I
had
just
that
looked
stat
up
just
that
ready to go.
That's a real statistic.
Oh my
and
goodness.
that's a lot of people dying. Let's say we
yeah.
had only 3,000 people a day dying. That's a major improvement.
Yeah.
So morbid.
No, and I'm not disagreeing with you, Alex. Like at the end of the day, I think computers, if programmed correctly, if built correctly, and if safety tested, computers can be much more efficient at, again, the subway, an airplane, driving an airplane, even agricultural equipment or a car. What I'm saying, and I'm not, you know, I am behind you, Alex. What I am saying though is that there's a lot more testing needed, and we have to ease into it. Okay. And I'll go back to that documentary that you guys had shared with me that I watched about automation. I think it was from HBO. You know, there's still a safety engineer who has to sit in that truck and make sure that the truck is braking, that it's looking, that the sensors are looking for it to have an opening for a left turn, or that it can tell the difference between a red stoplight or a green light for go, right? So I think that we're still a ways away from like complete automation of vehicles, and between safety concerns and government intervention and regulations, there's still a lot of work we need to do in order to make sure that everyone's safety is kept in mind. Do you guys agree? Yes, no?
I agree with you, but I think we are so close to having fully autonomous vehicles on the road that, you know, 5-10 years from now, it'll be a whole different discussion.
Yeah.
I mean, I was talking to an engineer that specialized in GPS. Right now, GPS can nail down your coordinates to like within like 30 meters or something like that. And he says that it's not very long before the new generation of GPS comes out, and they'll nail your position to within inches. So, you know, like all aspects of this technology are becoming better and better and better. It's not long before like it's happening. I don't think there's any question about it.
Man, Alex, one of these days, Arnold's going to knock on your door 50 years from now for something that you did because you love technology so much.
I'm going to welcome him in, and we'll have a cup of tea.
Nice.
Absolutely.
You know, this whole episode, not only does it remind me of the Terminator, obviously, as we've stated, but now the more we're talking, I'm thinking about Black Mirror. Do you guys ever watch Black Mirror?
No,
Absolutely.
On Netflix?
I didn't watch.
Oh, so good. It's just like all the stuff we're
Misha?
talking about.
Sorry, Misha, you've never seen Black Mirror?
No.
Oh, Misha,
okay. We're doing a Black Mirror episode next week.
Yes. Misha, Aravena, your homework is over the next week. You have to binge some Black Mirror on Netflix. All the episodes are, I believe, still available on Netflix, because this entire conversation that we're having right now makes me think about, you know, that these things are not that far away. This is not some science fiction thing. These things are happening now. And that's the whole beauty of Black Mirror, is that they talk about things that are plausible, right?
Yeah.
And so all this stuff, as you said, Alex, it's going to happen in the next 10 to 15 years. And there will come a time when all you do is press a button on your smartphone or on your smartwatch, and then a car shows up to drive you to work without a driver, and then it drops you off at your workplace. But guys, I am going to move on. Oh, Alex, you look like you're about to say something.
I just want to say, like, think of the benefits involved with that. I mean,
Yes.
Number one, if you could get safety better, that's great. But think about it, like, we're going to get older, you know, everyone's eventually going to be at the point where you've got to forfeit your driver's license, right? Happened to my grandmother, you know, not long ago, where she was relying on sort of friends and family. She didn't live in a city that had reliable public transit. And it's going to get to the point where having a personal vehicle is really going to be optional. And maybe it will just be a luxury item, you know, for some people to have cars. You're just going to
What you're saying is totally right. I totally agree with Andrew, though, in terms of regulations. If the computers will take over all of automation in the automobile industry, right, having some kind of regulations and having that human factor in that kind of oversees all of this. So like I said at the beginning, finding that balance, that for me would be the ideal situation.
You guys love your rules.
I know. Well, I also like not dying.
I've had it up to here with your rules.
Alex, man, I don't know about that attitude, brother. No, I'm kidding. Guys, there's so much we could do a whole episode on transportation, but I do want to move along, and I'm going to continue framing this as the fourth industrial revolution, because when I watched some documentaries or read some material, a lot of people regard, you know, automation and cobotics and sort of the rise or the continual rise of the machines as the fourth industrial revolution. And it kind of goes back to what you're saying, Alex, about those poor elevator operators who are now out of work. You know, we have to adapt or die, you know, and I remember, you know, reading about the first assembly lines of Ford in the early 1900s. That was a job that didn't exist. And so some people would have had a different job earlier, and then eventually they would have shifted into, because there's now a need for factory workers to assemble these cars in what Ford had established as the assembly line, right? Which is revolutionary and part of a previous industrial revolution. So I think our jobs will change as the circumstances and the technology changes. Sorry, as you said, Alex, before, and we will have to adapt to the new needs as these industrial revolutions happen. Which brings me to my next point. There is a lot of fear, even in my industry, which is, again, ad tech market research, about unemployment and about becoming redundant or obsolete because the computers are now doing your job. And a lot of people have stated that we need to, especially in Canada, look at running some pilots on universal income. And that was something they actually talked about in, here and there with, with different government officials. It hasn't really ballooned yet, and it hasn't really become substantial yet, but there is talk about potentially bringing in a universal income for people who lose their jobs if we see a higher unemployment rate in the future because of automation. Misha, I'll throw it over to you. What are your thoughts, pros, cons, and what are your feelings about having a universal income to supplement those who have lost their jobs to robots?
Such a simple way of putting it. You know what? I think overall, a universal basic income is a good idea, right? Now, I see all the pros to it, and I see some of the cons, right? I think the pros basically are that people are taken care of, right? Basic living is taken care of. Because let's be honest, the minimum wage, there's a difference between a minimum wage and a livable wage. Two very, very different things.
Agreed, yes.
Yeah, and I think basically a universal basic income would eliminate poverty in a sense, right? So you eliminate poverty, right? You're already going up, right? Obviously, some of the cons now, some people might say, oh, that'll make people lazy though, they won't want to work. And I guess maybe some people, but to be honest with you, I don't buy that. Again, what I look at it is that it will do more positives than negatives. So I totally support it, right? And my mom, actually, she works with a bunch of organizations trying to fight for universal basic income. So, she has taught me a lot about it, right? And the good that it can do. So I do support it, right?
I just want to say Andrew Yang is a snake oil salesman. He is selling us down the river. Don't listen to it. It's garbage. It's communism. Don't be scared into becoming a communist. It's a bad idea. I think that honestly, the free market will prevail. Everything will be okay. We don't have to become communists. It's totally going to be fine.
So Alex, you're talking about that invisible hand, which is a concept of free market capitalism, obviously, and that the invisible hand will guide the market and will guide jobs to, depending on the needs, depending on the needs of consumers.
The hand of God will.
I mean, if you want to throw some religion into that, I mean.
But seriously, I really think that this whole minimum income thing, it's not being it's not being honest with us. A lot of people sort of revert to this argument saying, what if everybody had $1,000 a month? I don't know about you, but $1,000 a month is nothing. And I can't really see how that's much different than the safety nets that we already have in place. Well, we already have what do you call it? Employment insurance. We already have welfare, which is less than $1,000 a month. But generally, most people, if they lose their job, there's going to be some sort of support to get you to transition. I think the idea with the minimum income is that it's indefinite. And if in fact that's the case, $1,000 a month for the rest of your life is a really sad and depressing existence. And I don't think I would want to encourage anybody to live that lifestyle.
You know what, just to piggyback off of that a little bit, Alex, I think it would depend on what the rules are, right? Like, if it's just for people that got laid off, okay, yes, I agree, that's not enough. But if it's basically given out to anyone that makes maybe under $50,000 a year, I don't know, whatever the number is, right? Something like that could pay for your food for the month, right? But for me, it would have to depend on the specifics of what they outline, right? Like, who can get on it? Can you still be working? Do you have to be unemployed? It would have to depend on what the rules are, because depending on the rules, $1,000 a month could help out someone a lot tremendously, right? But I don't know the details.
Well, I'm just going off of what I'm hearing these people like Andrew Yang pitch.
Yeah.
And that's that everybody gets $1,000 a month. working, not working, $1,000. And if
Isn't it
that's
for
the
a million?
case,
Are you
yeah,
sure?
like if that's the case, wouldn't that cause a little bit of like inflation? Basically, since everybody has a little bit more money every month, money itself is worth less.
That's true.
I'm not an
That's valid.
economist. I'm just a guy, but this is some really advanced thinking for me.
Yeah.
But I think there's something about it that just doesn't add up. I don't think there's any shortcuts to making all of society happy and wealthy and successful. I think
Alex,
hard work is the answer.
No, for sure. I have to agree. And I'm always one of those people. I agree that wealth is earned and you have to earn your way and work hard and kind of climb the ladder and all that good stuff. And I'm not disagreeing with you. And I think we'd have to take a step back. We could almost even do a whole other episode, but to be honest, I don't have enough of an economic or political background to like at this current moment, like speculate too much. But what I will say is it would have to be a total rehaul on the system. You can't just put a universal income in place and poof, all the problems are solved. You'd have to take a huge step back, and this would have to be an international discussion, not just a national or regional or provincial discussion, but an international discussion. Socialism or free market, whatever we want to call it, I guess. What are we? Mixed markets. That's what we're called in Canada because we're a bit socialist, but we're also a bit capitalist. We have a good balance here in Canada between socialism and free market capitalism. But all that would have to be rethought, and it would be a major overhaul of the system in order to get this in place. And I kind of wonder, if automation will truly lead to such a high unemployment rate, or if there will be new needs along the way. Like, who knows? Maybe if automation really does take off at an exponential rate, maybe different and new jobs will be created as a result.
That's exactly it. I've got a list here of like a whole bunch of jobs that did not exist 10 years ago. Like we got a big data analyst, app developer, social media manager, YouTuber, podcast producer, Instagram influencer, Uber driver, which, well, that'll be gone soon. Salesforce developer, pro gamers, Twitch streamers, escape room owners, drone operator, AI engineer, content moderator, crowd-funded entrepreneurs. This is just like the ones that I could find, but like every time you create new technology, you have new jobs and new opportunities that happen as a result of that.
But do you also?
I'd say let's not freak out. Let's not become communists. We're gonna be fine.
It eliminates older jobs though as well too, right? So that's all I had to say there.
I'm just saying, like.
So I was going to say, it goes back to what I said, adapt or die, right? Adapt or die. And humans have to be flexible and be willing to grow as the needs of society change, right? So guys, I do want to move on, but still on the same topic. What's that?
When in Rome, do as the Romans do.
That's true. That's true. Very well put. So on this topic, a lot of people think that it's going to be the blue collar jobs that all get eliminated. Again, sort of truckers, right? Or factory workers. When you see more automation in the factories, finer capabilities of the reaching arm of the robot to do finer work and stuff in a factory, whatever. So people think about these blue collar jobs, but something that I was reading up on was white collar jobs as well. And people say, well, no, you have a higher level of cognitive thinking that's needed for that. You're on a higher cognitive plane, however you want to describe it. But trading, right? So if you think about the stock market, people are shouting at each other across the room to buy, sell, and doing all these hand signals. Well, look at that, right? Like, look how much automation has taken over trading. I mean, people still are on the stock market ground, right? Like on the floor at the Toronto Stock Exchange or on Wall Street, but a lot of that's going to get automated, right? So what do you guys have to say about sort of these higher level of thinking type white collar jobs and being replaced as well in the future?
I say good. Give the jobs back to the middle class. No.
No, that's kind of what's happening. I went to the emergency room like the other day, and it was a nurse practitioner that I ended up seeing.
Yes,
And I thought, and I actually had a really pleasant experience dealing with this nurse practitioner. She was sort of getting like a doctor to sort of like sign off on her advice. But I think that's great. Why not make it more accessible to people? Doctors are so highly paid, overpaid, you might say. Why not make healthcare more accessible? And if you can do that with robots performing surgery from 1,000 miles away, I think that's amazing.
I think, to go off of that just a tiny bit, I think it's about helping the people that are in most need. And what I mean by that, people that make a very, very, very good income, especially wealthy people. I mean, you hear guys like Obama when he was president coming on and saying we need to tax the richer more and not take away as much money from the middle class or lower, things like that. And I totally support that, right? The more you have, the more you can give back. The less you have, we shouldn't punish you to give just as much, right? So I believe it's about taking care of the little people, if you will.
Yeah. And one of the things is like everybody knows how expensive lawyers and doctors, their services, every hour that
everyone
they spend
needs legal aid nowadays.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing that I was amazed to find out in my research for this was that a big chunk of lawyers' work analyzing really long documents can be done by computer with these machine learning algorithms. They can actually be more accurate in picking out problems with contracts and things like that. Yeah. So it just makes things more affordable for everybody.
Oh, very much so, Alex. You hit it on the head, man, because I know for me, even just closing on this property that I'm buying, I have to pay an ungodly amount of money to a lawyer to like look over like my mortgage or just different things to do with the house and all this sort of stuff. And imagine if that was all automated, like I would be a much richer man right now. But it's true though, like even in the big scheme of things, like if you have an ongoing court case, like mine's just a little thing, like I'm closing on a property. But if you've been in a car accident and you have to get representation in court, if you're in a lawsuit situation or a long drawn out like situation, would you, I think this type of thing is in your benefit for as you said, for Misha, the small people who again, like wouldn't be able to afford a lawyer at $300 an hour or $500 an hour or whatever it happens to be. They're now going to have that immediate access at a cheaper cost because, to your point, Alex, you have this machine learning, which I will talk about machine learning in greater detail later, but these machines that are becoming more adept at picking out clauses in a long document, as you mentioned, Alex, and just stuff like that can really free up not only
and I think we can all agree that lawyers can go. Fuck them.
Yeah. No way. I disagree. That's the one profession we'll probably need the most. They're definitely essential. We'll always need, there's always going to be crime. Otherwise, we'll be living in some utopia that only exists in books or the movies, and we will need legal advice. So I'm going to disagree there. We are going to need lawyers, even though some of them can be blood-sucking vampires. I get it. But we need their assistance.
No, for sure. And I think what Alex was talking about was more so like some of like the paralegal or sort of like the not the person in the courtroom who's actually like appealing to the jury. I'm not talking about that position. I'm talking about the backroom stuff where you're scanning over very long documents and having to pick out particular information. I think computers will speed that up, and again, they don't get tired and drowsy, right? Like a computer can do that for a long amount of time without having to take a break. Now, guys, I want to move on because we've talked about lawyers, we've talked about traders, we've talked about some of these white collar jobs, and we've even talked about the medical sector, but I wanted to zoom in just a little bit, just briefly, because we did talk about doctors as well. Now, Alex, would you feel comfortable going on a in for a surgery and being in the OR and knowing that a computer may cut a hole in you using a laser, and that a robotic there could be robotic assisted surgeries that are going to be taking off more and more?
I would be 100% comfortable with that, because these surgeries, not only are these doctors able to perform with more dexterity, they're able to do it less invasively. So they're able to just take like 3 tiny incisions in your abdomen, let's say, and they can basically feed these things in there, and they've got like just as much degrees of flexibility as your hands do, but they're inside your stomach with these tools. It's incredible. I think the advancements when it comes to machines and performing surgery have come a long way, and I think it's incredibly promising. It's one of the most promising fields in medicine today. I think it's amazing.
Misha, do you agree, disagree? How do you feel about medical technology really taking off, and the fact that you could go in for a surgery and there may be fewer nurses or assistants in the room, and it may just be a doctor and a couple of robots?
I'm going to absolutely disagree with Alex, and what I mean by that is I have no problem with. I'm going to explain right now. I have no problem with a machine, a robot, making incisions in me and doing the operation. But I would need a doctor and maybe a nurse there to oversee the procedure, make sure everything is going smoothly. A doctor, a human being there for counsel. So I wouldn't want to rely 100% on the machine. It would have to be a 50-50 kind of thing for me.
I think that's exactly what's happening is you're seeing nurses take a bigger role rather than just sort of like handing the scalpel. They're actually setting up the equipment and positioning it. It's a much more advanced role that they're stepping into. And I think it's great for their profession. And I don't think you're alone in the surgery room with these with these tentacles that are just like
No, again, a good example is I had LASIK done on my eyes not too long ago, right? And I remember when I went in for that surgery, right, I had the nurse, I had the doctor, and the machine, doing all of the laser with my eyes. And as that was happening, the doctor was talking to me, making sure I was calm, everything was going well. And that's the balance that I'm talking about. My theme for this episode is the balance of the human factor, the machine factor, right? I don't think we can have just 100% of one or the other. That's my bottom line that I'm going to keep repeating throughout this show.
So you've had a machine operate on your eyeball, and you're saying you wouldn't drive in a self-driving car?
I knew you were gonna. No. Well, no, of course I would do it, right? But I personally just don't feel comfortable with machines taking over completely, right?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
No, Misha, and I'll piggyback off that, because I see where you're coming from in terms of your theme tonight, and I have to concur. And I'm not by any means saying like tomorrow I want to get on the subway and there's no guard, there's no human intervention, there's no human position, as a subway driver. That's not what I'm saying. And I don't think really, Alex, I don't really think you're saying that either. Just like I wouldn't want to step in a driverless car tomorrow. We need to have, again, there's 2 things here. There's the testing and regulations aspect that I mentioned, but then there's also that human intervention aspect. And even if robotic surgery does become more advanced, you still need a doctor to oversee those machines, as you said. You still need a guard in the subway, even if there's just one person in the subway to drive that subway train, or just make sure nothing happens. A robot can do the braking, right? Like the stopping and accelerating braking, but you still need a human there, right? Even in an airplane, like even if they historically you've had a pilot and a co-pilot. What's wrong with having a computerized pilot, but then the co-pilot's a human being, right? I don't think we're at a stage yet where we can go fully robotic. And I think it would be a mistake to jump there. And I still think you do need, for sure, that human intervention or sort of human supervision. Okay. So guys, before we finish up, I mean, I could do a whole other part 2 episode. There's a lot of ground to cover, but I did want to talk about machine learning. It's a very fascinating topic, and it's being used a lot by some of these big tech companies. And for the audience, if you guys missed it, definitely take a look at our big tech episode that was hosted by Alex, because it's a fascinating episode. And so that's why I kind of wanted to finish on this topic, kind of circling back to big tech. You know, and I do want to use an example. I work with YouTube in my job. I work with Google a lot in YouTube. And so a topic I wanted to bring up, just because it's I'm familiar with it, would be the fact that on social media, and I will use YouTube as an example, if someone posts graphic content, content with racism, content with weaponry of people of ultra violent situations, people have to screen those videos. Like, there's literally a person who has to sit there and screen and say, oh, this isn't appropriate for certain audiences or whatever. But then machines are starting to take over that more. And I'm not saying that humans have been eliminated whatsoever from the position, like fully, but there is more of a reliance on machines, because machines are getting better at recognizing, okay, that's a gun, or that is, or if there's an article on Facebook and there's someone's has a derogatory slang, like computers can pick that out. So how do you guys feel about sort of machine learning? It's a very new and exciting thing right now. Do you guys have anything to add on the topic of machine learning and automation when it comes to social media and sort of that sort of thing?
I think there's some benefits to it. I remember when I was in high school, there was a community newspaper. And one day, this newspaper came out, and everyone was looking through it, and there was a picture of one of the kids that live in our town. It was a picture of the kid just like getting out of the pool or something like that, and his wiener was hanging out, and it was like it was the front page, and and the thing is like, maybe machine learning could have caught that, but unfortunately, this kid's wiener was on the front page, because the editor just it was kind of hard to notice like on first glance until somebody points it out.
He literally got caught with his pants down. He got caught with his pants down for real. And that's, and I think that is one of the benefits, is that humans have to take a while. Humans work at a normal speed, right? Like you can watch a video clip in real time and say, okay, there's violence, or there's a racial slur, whatever it happens to be, and that's a very important role for humans to intervene and say, well, you can't have this on Facebook, you can't have it on YouTube. It's goes against our content guidelines. Okay, but on the flip side, machines can do it faster. Misha, do you have anything to say on the topic of machines and kind of working in the online space when it comes to this stuff?
Yeah, well, I want to say first, Alex, your story, that was the story of the night.
Yes.
That was hilarious. But I will say, ultimately, I do more or less agree with you. I do think machine learning, obviously, if we're going to have all this amazing technology, why not make it the best we possibly can, right? And reach for the stars, as they say. But I do worry that will we go too far, right? And that's what these, dystopian films that we will talk about in future episodes is all about. Where do we draw the line, right? Yeah. We always say, as human beings, can we do this? Can we do this? We never stop to ask, should we do this?
Yeah.
Right? So that, again, I'm like a broken record, balance, right? When do we reach that point? But I do more or less agree with you, Alex, that, if we're going to go for it, let's go for it. But let's make the rules and regulations and still have that human component there, just in case.
Well, I mean, and I guess in closing, like you said, you talked about balance, and you talked about, not going too crazy with these things, but you kind of have to look at, I guess in closing here, it's happening all around us, and we have to be ready for it. And I do agree with you in that we cannot rush in. Again, that could be a car, okay? It could be the airplane, it could be the medical sector, anything we've talked about. There we have to take careful, measured steps. There has to be a balance. There has to be human intervention. There has to be regulations. There has to be safety protocols, and there has to be rules. And we can't just get there overnight. So, guys, I think we've covered a lot of topics here tonight within the overarching idea of the oncoming world of automation. We've talked about universal income, whether we should be planning for job loss in the future. We've talked about machine learning and algorithms, and teaching a machine a pattern so we can pick out and recognize imagery, or understand what violent imagery looks like, or what an apple looks like, or what a car looks like. So there's machine learning, there's the medical sector, there's white collar positions, transportation. We've covered a lot of ground here, and we could do a whole other episode, because it's such an exciting and interesting space. So Alex, I'll throw it off to you. Do you have any closing thoughts around sort of where we're headed, and sort of the direction we should be going in as we see more and more automation?
I think generally the future is exciting. We've got cars driving us around. We've got satellites around the earth that are beaming high-speed internet to the center of Africa. The future is exciting. Let's stay focused. Nobody gets scared. Nobody become a communist. We're going to be okay. Don't worry about it.
I like it. Misha, any closing thoughts in this relatively unknown but exciting space that we're heading in?
Yeah, I would just say ultimately, whatever new technologies come, I'll be excited to see what they are. But like anything, I hope the governments of the world and people use it safely and responsibly, right? Otherwise, Arnold is going to show up at all of our doors.
Well, that's right. And I know you say it facetiously, but it does get used in warfare. I mean, we have drones, right? Like we have drones that can without any sort of human intervention, a fully automated small plane essentially that can go and shoot down people, and there's no life at risk. I mean, in terms of an operator, there's no life at risk, because it's a machine just going and bombarding and doing its thing. So personally, I don't want to see the rise of the machines. I don't want to see the rise of Skynet and a giant nuclear bomb going off that was caused by the machines, and all this post-apocalyptic nonsense that we see in the Terminator. So I think the theme of tonight is measured steps and not jumping in and rushing in. So that pretty much wraps it up for me and my final thoughts. I think it's a very exciting space, and I can't wait to see what comes. And I think we'll just have to take it one step at a time.
Awesome stuff. All right, guys. Well, that was another episode of the Lockdown Lowdown. Please, 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 if you like what you saw, hit the like button, subscribe, support the channel, support the podcast, tell all your friends about the Lockdown Lowdown, and we will give you more awesome content. As always, thanks for watching.